Well, welcome to the Burnout Podcast. It's an honor today to have Jessica Harris with me today. Jessica is a former therapist, now helping therapists with their practice. Empowering Therapists is the name of your organization. And really excited to share her story, how she got into therapy and a lot of her life lessons and common themes she's seen working with patients and the people she's working with and those patients. And again, this whole purpose of this podcast is for you to be your own hero. And it's an opportunity to lean in and realize that you are the hero in your story and that you can have anything or be anything you want. So Jessica, thank you for joining me today on the Burnout Podcast.
Of course, I'm excited to be here.
So Jessica, let's dive into this. How did you even decide to become a therapist?
Yeah, I think ever since high school, I wanted to be a therapist. I like talking to people. I like giving advice to people. So I kind of just knew I wanted to be a therapist for a really long time. And yeah, I think that's like what initially got me into it, is I just like learning how the brain worked and everything. So ever since high school, I was like very gung-ho that was going to be the path for me.
Okay. And so would you study psychology?
Yeah, I studied psychology for my undergrad and then master's in social work. And the bummer with that is I always also wanted to make a lot of money. And in grad school, they literally tell you, like, you didn't go into this field for money. You know, you're here to help people, but you're not going to make money. So I was always excited to be a therapist. And it was like, wait a second, but I'm not going to make any money. Like, it's very much like a self-sacrifice thing.
Okay. But it feels like, and we'll get into this, right? How you were able
Yeah.
to kind of break through that and do that, right?
Yeah.
And obviously in a very crowded space too. So again, you wanted to do this and, getting into it and wanting to do something versus actually doing something are very different.
Yeah.
Right. And so were there any major life events or things that you had to work through as you kind of became a therapist, like in your own journey, in your own mental health and your own, self-discovery process?
Yeah, I think in order to like what led me to being a therapist, I remember there was a time in college where I had like a pretty like deep area of like feeling really deeply depressed for a while. And I remember being like the whole time I was feeling like so depressed and so hopeless and so anxious. I was like, I'm so glad I'm going through this, because I'd be a really terrible therapist if I didn't fully understand like how bad things can be, because I'm such an optimist. And so for me, it was easy to be like, oh, like, just think better thoughts, just be more positive. But going through that was like, oh, sometimes there's more that needs to be done. And so I remember that was like a really transformative period for me of being able to like empathize so much deeper with people.
What was the root of your depression?
Honestly, that's a really great question. I think just I was not where I wanted to be at in life, and I was in college and fresh off of a Mormon mission and in the dating world, and just feeling very dark all the time. So
interesting you say this, right? Because I don't know if I'm going to say this correctly, but sometimes there can be this element of I will call it positive toxicity.
Oh yeah, I forgot
right?
about that.
Meaning, it's not okay to not be okay. It's not okay to to have negative thoughts or depression. That it's somehow we tie to our worth. I'm not supposed to feel this way, especially someone that's been this eternal optimist, and all of a sudden you're not being optimistic. So you probably during that season found yourself even beating yourself up even more. I'm like, you're feeling sad, and then you're getting upset with yourself that you're feeling sad. And it's interesting. I feel. I mean, I say this all the time. We put people, relationships, on pedestals, right? Mm-hmm. And many times when we put someone on a pedestal, we see somebody in a certain light, many times we think, or we have this impression that they figured it out, or they did that, and many times what we don't realize is that they, in order to have what they ultimately have or what we desire, is they had their own bouts with depression, challenges, heartache, whatever it happens to be, right? And I believe what connects us more than anything are the challenges that we're faced with, our limiting beliefs, the negative self-talk. We all have it. And many times it's difficult, especially for men, to be able to share that and be able to talk through that. And what I found in my own journey is, I've had a tendency in the past to be a head case. And when I get down on myself, my default in the past was to then beat myself up for beating down on myself, which then takes you even lower and lower and lower, right?
Yeah.
Versus just like, oh, I'm feeling this way again, and understanding that it's just part of life. And I truly believe that you can't really truly feel the highs or appreciate the highs unless you've actually experienced the lows, in many cases, the lows of lows, right? So looking back on that, in your own bout, I mean, I love what you said is like, it gave you the ability to empathetically connect with your patients and your clients that you were working with as a therapist.
Yeah, so much deeper than I would have otherwise. Like that time was very miserable in my life, and the whole time I was like, I know I need to go through this to be a better therapist, to be a better human being, but I hated every second of it. But yeah, it's just
Were you also at the time talking to your own therapist?
Yeah, that was the first time I'd ever reached out to a therapist. I was in despair, like all the time. So I did reach out, and I was like, oh, I need to be seeing a therapist because I'm going to be on the other side of the couch pretty soon. I was going to school for that. So I was like, I want to be on this side of the couch, like in the client's shoes to like see what it's like. And I really needed it at the time too.
When I first went to therapy, gosh, 10 years ago, like I was married at the time. And I'm just like, all right, I got to do something. And at that time, like I wasn't one that would open up, share my feelings. I mean, vulnerability didn't even exist, like, oh, what's that? I didn't even know what that was. And I remember finally, I'm like, I got to figure something out. And I remember I called a therapist and she goes, well, why do you want to come in? I'm like, I need to figure my shit out. I mean, ultimately it came down to that. And, do you find that even in today's world, because you're in this world, that there's still a stigma or a negative connotation associated with therapy?
For sure. It's definitely a lot better. And I think the younger generation, it's a lot better. And I think especially with females, but then males, and a lot of the males I worked with that called in, it was like their first time ever going to therapy. And you could tell that they were like nervous about it compared to like females who'd maybe been multiple times. And not always, like obviously that's way overgeneralizing things. But yeah, there's still a stigma. It's just not as strong as it used to be, but it's still a big step for people.
Yeah. Did you find many times like the men that were calling in were either many times where like it's maybe they were married, it was their wife saying, hey, you need to go see somebody? Was it someone pushing them, or was it many times them just taking their own initiative?
And probably both. But yeah, there were a lot of times where it was like my wife really wants me to get in, or the wife was calling for the husband. But then I think the men who were single, who were like, I need to figure my shit out. Like, I'm not happy. And yeah.
So your bout with depression, right? And kind of going through that. Was it a process? Was there like an aha? Like what kind of got you out of that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Because I had another period of depression a couple years ago that was much deeper than that. I think this one, a lot of it was timing. A lot of it was like letting go of old stories, being okay with where I was at in life. I was feeling a lot of pressure of like, I need to be here in life because that's where everyone around me was telling me I needed to be. And so I think just like letting go of that. And then I ended up getting into a relationship with my now ex-husband. That was when we got married. And I think that kind of helped settle some things too.
Okay. And how long were you married for?
4 years.
4 years. Okay. Yeah. And you guys had a daughter together?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful 5-year-old. She's great.
And, a thing that comes up a lot, anytime I post anything on social media about my divorce, because it didn't start this way, but, my co-parent, she and I we co-parent very well together. We've got a great relationship. We're much better as friends and co-parents than we were as married, but it's fascinating. Anytime I post that, I always get a lot of engagement, a lot of like, how'd you do this? How'd you figure this out? And, I asked you previously to start and record this, like how things are with your co-parent. You said things are good. And, and why do you think, I know the reason, I'm just curious from your perspective, from a therapist's point of view, I'm guessing that you had patients, clients that, were either going through divorce or in a very toxic situation where they couldn't talk to it. What do you think is the common theme why people can't seem to get past, a divorce, or still see their ex as like the arch enemy number one? That's a huge theme that I think is more predominant than not. And I think it's actually more rare. The relationship you have with your co-parent and like I have is actually, it's more rare than not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think people still have such a hard time, like being able to co-parent, after a divorce, or be able to maintain a civil relationship?
Yeah. I'm sure there's so many factors. I think a huge one is people like still holding on to grudges, not being able to forgive, not being able to let go. I remember having moments like early on where I was like, I don't want to carry any of this. Like, I don't want to, sit in this like anger feeling, and like, I just want to release it. I want to let it go. I want what's best for my daughter. And luckily, like, I feel lucky that he's also a cordial, patient person where it's easy to get along with. And so I know some people where it's just, they can do everything they can in their power, but if the other person's not willing to be cordial, then that's going to be tough. But I think the big thing is like swallowing your pride, being humble, letting go of the anger, releasing that. so you can live a happier life yourself.
Yeah, I just had a conference call with a new client, kind of an introductory call where he got divorced here a couple of years ago, and as we're talking through things and I'm sharing my own experience, he's like, you know what, I'm realizing as we're talking that he goes that I, played a much bigger role in my divorce.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it's so easy to point a finger at somebody else. It's so easy to say he or she did this. This is the reason and because the reality is accountability, taking radical ownership is very challenging for all of us, more for others. But also when you can take accountability and just accept and take, hey, yes, I participated in this. I contributed to this. This is what I did, and accept it. Once you can accept it and just see it for what it is, I found that that's one of the greatest ways to be able to release resentment.
Yeah.
It's another way of letting your ego go down a little bit, swallowing your pride and so forth. Accountability, I think, is an incredible way to be able to shift through that in order to not have the resentment. Because at the end of the day, the only thing we have any control over is ourselves. And I found myself, initially when I first got divorced, just angry, pissed, like just not, it's in my head. I'm just like all the things. And, and I'm sure it was over time, but it felt like all of a sudden it's like, I'm just hurting myself. She's not even in my life right now. I mean, day to day. And so any emotions I'm having are mine. So I can choose to think differently. I can change the story. I can see her differently. I started to express a lot of gratitude for her and, both in writing, saying it out loud, and because gratitude is an incredible tool to be able to move through negative emotions, and also to see people from a different light. There's always two sides to a coin. There's always two ways you can look at it. And many times it doesn't feel like a choice, but we actually have a choice. We can choose to think different. We can choose to do different. And what's so important for me today in my life is I just want peace. I want inner peace. And if that means letting go of old stories, swallowing my pride, I just don't want to give my power away. It's very disempowering when we allow somebody else, no matter what's happened in the past, to control the present, to, be in our thoughts, living rent free, if you will, in our, because at the end of the day, it's not about them. It's about us.
Yeah. And so often I feel like in divorce too, people are trying to look at like who's at fault and trying to put all the blame on the other person. When in reality, like both people like have stuff to work on regardless of like the outcome. And that's a huge thing I've been doing in business too, is like that extreme ownership for everything. And so, okay, what was my role in this and how can I let go of things? And I love the gratitude perspective too, because a lot of times with relationships, you chose to be with them at some point in your life. And so how can you tap back into like the good things and letting go of the hard things to just move forward in your life?
It's painful. I say this all the time. I mean, the hardest person we have ever faced, will face, or currently face is ourselves.
Absolutely.
The stories we tell ourselves and and navigating and working through all of that. And again, I just want to reiterate this. It is so confident building, empowering when you can just say, you know what, this is on me. And just accept it. Even if you don't tell somebody else. I recently, I've been divorced like 7+ years now. And so, we've kind of gone through the really difficult challenge and we can't talk to like, she's going to be in my life forever because we have kids together. And I've just launched a fitness line helping men that have over 40 pounds to lose. And I had messaged her and asked her for all these old pictures because I was really heavy when I was with her. And, so all these different emotions were coming up, and I've told this to her already, but I messaged her and I said, hey, I just wanted to say, I'm so sorry for, there was a lot of projection of my own insecurities onto you. And the way I used to show up, it wasn't, even though I might've been making it about you, it really was me. I just didn't have the words or the skills or the tools to be able to really articulate that. And, and even all these years later, she's like, thank you. That means a lot. Like, I didn't know what to do with you. So it just, it opened up the conversation. It was uncomfortable, but it freeing at the same time, and also brought us closer, and it created empathy, understanding, and also just kind of helping let go of any, residual resentment or ill feelings. It's really healthy to really take ownership, make amends where possible. It's healing.
No, I agree. To be able to have those conversations. I had a few conversations like that with my ex too, where we both like took accountability. It was like, oh, this thing I used to blame you for, that was on me actually, and the healing power of that.
What's the common theme when you were because how long were you an active therapist for?
About 5 years.
Okay. Did you, work with both men and women? Again, a lot of people are coming to therapy, right? Because some are like, their significant other saying, you need to go to therapy. But most of the time, like they want to work through something's not working. Did you see a common theme almost with I'm always curious about this, like whether, why people feel stuck or why people are in certain positions. Did you see a common theme with patients?
Yeah, I feel like, because I worked with a lot of couples, I feel like the common theme there was like defensiveness. Like you would just watch the defensiveness unfold, or even like working with individuals working on their relationships by themselves. There was a lot of like not taking ownership, kind of blaming the other person, feeling stuck in old things. And a lot of it comes down to trauma too, because I think a lot of like the individuals I worked with that have nothing to do with relationships, just working on themselves, a lot of it was like trauma and just feeling so stuck in childhood things that happened to them or unfair things, and not always like these extreme things, but sometimes just like a continued hardship or negative stories they were like believing about themselves or the world around them or other people that people were just stuck in. They weren't able to like let go and break through to like get to the next level. So a lot of people just feeling stuck, whatever it was, their relationships, their mental health, people feeling like they didn't have control in a situation that they actually did have control in, and a lack of acceptance, especially in relationships. It's like they're so angry at their partner, but they want to stay, but there wasn't any acceptance over the little things over their partner that might not ever change. And so constantly trying to like fight against the things that were not probably going to change in life.
So I'm curious, the acceptance, right? Because again, a lot of like what holds us back is a story, right? Because it fits our narrative.
Yeah.
And so many times, like we're so fixated on our experience, our story, because it fits the narrative. It almost validates why I feel the way I feel.
Yeah.
I'm angry because she did this.
Yeah.
And I'm hurt because she did this, right? But again, it's still rooted in a story. And it's interesting that like I would guess that like where people had breakthroughs more often than not, it's when all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, this story doesn't serve me. I'm like, oh, actually there is a different perspective. Is that when you saw breakthroughs, what happened is all of a sudden they're just like, wait a minute, like this is exhausting, or, oh my gosh, I can change this.
Yeah, and kind of going back to like that extreme ownership piece again, where for whatever it was, whether it's their mental health, whether it's their trauma, whether it's the relationship of, oh, I don't need to play this like victim card, even though I may have been a victim. And that's where it's hard. If you've been a victim, but then you don't want to be stuck in that victim mentality forever, to be able to like break free of that and empower yourself to like move forward, I think is a huge piece.
I believe life is happening for us, and there are many things in life that happen to us that we didn't choose.
Yeah.
But for those moments or those experiences, no matter how big or small, yes, things happen to us, but yet we're still responsible, 100% responsible with what we do with that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think so many times, again, not wanting to take responsibility to change or to work through or heal through this keeps us stuck, because again, it's easier to point a finger. Well, I'm here because they did this. I'm here because this happened to me. And it's just a story, but it's sad because that story, that belief can get so ingrained that it just becomes part of who somebody is. And they stay in that. Sometimes I know people that have this victim mentality because of something that happened to them 20 years ago or 30 years ago. I mean, it's sad.
Yeah, and it's like, express it, feel the anger, feel the rage, don't suppress it. But once you do that, then like work through it so you can let go of that, so you can stop letting that define your whole life.
Why do people have such a hard time allowing themselves to feel it?
I think just society teaches, especially men, don't feel, don't talk about it, don't express it. There's embarrassment, there's shame around a lot of things that happen to people, of like, don't talk about it. There's the toxic positivity that like I feel like I grew up with, of just put on a smile and everything's fine, and don't express it. And so then it like gets stored in our body and it feels trapped, and so then it's harder to like let go of those things. So there is a power in expressing those things and releasing them so you can move forward with your life.
Yeah, I had, I think this is more true for men, is a lot of times we as men don't know what to do with our feelings.
Yeah.
Right? It gets uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And again, society has taught us that we can't show our emotions. We've got to be steadfast like all the time. And many times for men, that inability, like whether it's whatever the emotion feeling, anxiety, loneliness, not feeling enough of, a lot of times not knowing how to like just sit in that and feel that, it gets manifested as anger.
Yeah.
We're angry.
Yeah.
So, years after I was divorced, and having conversations with Jenny and my ex, she said, "You were always angry with me." She goes, many times she goes, "I thought you hated me." And I'm like, ugh, hated you. And, looking back on it, that's her experience. It's not how I felt, but she experienced this anger. Mm-hmm. And really what the anger was just a projection of loneliness, of disconnection, of wanting, and not having the tools or how to be able to say it, and not knowing how to just to say, "I'm just sad." Mm-hmm. I didn't even have the words to it. Mm-hmm. It just was anger. Yeah. It was anger. It was anger. And I think men far too often get like, "Oh, he's just always angry. He's always this." And I've just even learned with my own children, because of my own experiences, if one of my kids is like really angry and just like, whoo, I'm like, rather than come at them because of how they're showing up in that particular moment, and I'm not perfect at this, so I've gotten a lot better. It's like I start asking questions. And many times that anger could be something as simple as they're hungry. Mm-hmm. They don't have the words for it, or they're struggling in school, mm-hmm. or something happened earlier in the day and they don't know how to process it. So you just keep asking questions and questions. It's an invitation to all of us that especially for the people that are they're close to us, if anger is coming, if there's really anger, is to do your best to not react to the anger and try to get to the source. Ask questions, because more often than not, it's rooted in something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Like dig deeper. And that's a lot of what people talk about in therapy too. Like there's the surface emotion, but what's behind that? And sometimes it is just hungry, tired, those kind of things. But then other times it's like even deeper than that, and working through that.
Yeah. And many times for men, that when we don't allow ourselves to feel or express, or even if there's not safety to be able to express those, mm-hmm. we can tend to lead to behaviors. And so that's where addiction many times, because mm-hmm. for me, addiction really is rooted in avoidance.
Yeah.
It's avoiding the hard conversations, avoiding expressing, not knowing what to do. And so to try to make those feelings go away, we numb out with mm-hmm. whatever the modality is, mm-hmm. which provides temporary relief. But all we're really doing is kicking the can down the road. It's inevitable. It's going to come out at some point, mm-hmm. And the more you keep it buried, the fact is when it comes out, it's going to come out even louder.
Yeah, exactly.
My default in the past is I wouldn't use my voice. So something would bother me and but I wouldn't express it because I didn't have the confidence to say it, because I was worried about the reaction or confrontation or whatever. But my default was like, if I didn't say anything and all of a sudden, something could be continuing to happen over and over, and I'm building up resentment, and then all of a sudden I lose my shit, mm-hmm. and it just comes out and then the delivery sucks. And then the whole conversation becomes about my delivery rather than what's the core issue that I'm dealing with. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? And
absolutely.
And I feel like far too often, especially in relationships, that, when one partner expresses a concern, an issue, whatever happens to be, if the delivery is such a way, the focus is on the delivery, or if the delivery comes and then one person reacts, it then becomes about the reaction, and the core issue completely gets dismissed or doesn't even get addressed, because, mm-hmm. Couples tend to get so caught up in the reaction to each other that we never even get to the core thing. Yeah,
exactly. I feel like that happens all the time. Those repressed emotions are still there. That's why they need to be expressed, and otherwise they're bottled up, and then the fight becomes not even what the fight is truly about anymore.
Yeah. So I'm in a season 2 because I don't want to feel. I know that I know that's my default. Mm-hmm. So like if I'm feeling anything, mm-hmm. like I'll sit and like, do I need to address this? But if it's still there, it's like I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I'd rather have a little bit of an uncomfortable conversation, versus letting it build up to where all of a sudden it becomes some major issue that didn't necessarily need to be because it wasn't expressed.
Exactly. Just expressing it as you go rather than all at once where it explodes.
So question for you from a therapist perspective, if you have let's say a husband and wife, right, that come into therapy, are you an advocate for each of them having their own therapist and then also having couples therapy, or just doing couples therapy, or one doing the work? I mean, how do you view that? Because I've heard different opinions on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's beneficial for, especially going through that time period, to like individual therapy is also a benefit. I think it's whatever. I'm very supportive of like whatever the couple wants though. Like for some people, Like one partner is dragging the other person almost to couples therapy, and so that's all they're willing to do. They're not willing to do individual therapy at the time. Sometimes you can tell that one partner really needs individual therapy, and so sometimes you can refer out, or I know some therapists will work with one partner and the couple, but some people are like very against that because then they don't want to be like too biased towards the one that they're doing individual therapy with, so they'll refer out. But a lot of times you can tell that somebody really needs to work on some stuff, or both of them, but they're just resistant to it. And so if couples therapy is all they're willing to do, then I take it. But yes, there's absolutely benefits to like working through your own stuff while you're, so yeah, that's most recommended to do both.
I have a good friend, he and his wife, they go to the same therapist. 1 week they each go alone.
Okay.
And then they go together.
Okay.
So it's the same therapist that's working with all, and it seems to be really working for them.
Yeah. If it's able to work, then that's great. Sometimes people feel like, oh, there might be too much of a bias, but as long as it's working for them, then I think that's great.
Fascinating. So you had your therapy practice and then have since transitioned, and now you work helping therapists build their book of business to grow their own practice.
Yeah. So I grew a therapy practice. It was private pay only. And so, I grew that pretty quickly. In 4 months, I filled up my caseload and started hiring. I hired 6 other therapists. And so I had a lot of people are like, how do you grow so fast, especially in this economy? Like, I can't get any clients. So then I started doing like business coaching on the side while also having my therapy practice. But then I ended up creating a full on like 12-week coaching program for therapists to learn how to get clients and market. And that's exploded over the past year. So I did sell my practice in June of this past year just because single mom and growing 2 like really successful businesses, my burnout levels were through the roof. So yeah, now I just focus on coaching therapists on marketing and the business side of things, which I never thought I would like. My whole life I'd been to school for therapy. So it's been really cool to like make that shift and to like find that that's like, I loved my therapy clients, but like my real passion is helping people make a lot of money and focusing in on the business marketing side of things.
So speaking of money, I believe it's fascinating. You've got people that work really hard, that just many times can't seem to break through, right? They get to kind of being just enough, or they're just kind of coasting by, but they're not really able to break through. And I have found, in my years of a business experience and having a very successful business and is many times that's the reason one in particular individual can't break through has nothing to do with work ethic or even the way it's many times it's tied to their money story, right? And my understanding is, you and I talked, on the phone prior to you coming here, is like you've had your own money story and your own scarcity, or I should say you used to have a scarcity mindset around money. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Let's dig into that. Like what used to be your story around money?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up poor. I grew up feeling like there was never enough, that money was always going to run out. My parents were always stressed about money, still are. And so that was just what I was used to. Like, I think about like my first money memory of like counting pennies and quarters and dimes on the floor for my parents to be able to pay the bills from our piggy banks. And just, there was so much scarcity around money my whole life. And I knew I always wanted to make a lot of money. But once I started making it through business, there was a lot of fears that would come up and a lot of, oh my gosh, what if this runs out? Or like I'd make a lot of money one week and then I would feel all this, like, I'm not worthy of this. This is too good to be true. And so then my income would dip for a little bit until I like started working through it again. So a lot of times people that I help too, like they're looking for strategies. Like, how do I grow my business? Give me the strategies. And I do that. But the biggest piece that helps the therapist I work with is also very similar. It's like the money mindset and feeling like you're worthy of money, especially as a therapist where you're literally taught to self-sacrifice. You're never going to make money. So that's another piece too. Like, it's okay to make a lot of money, especially as a female. And I don't know, there's just so many like messed up money stories that I have had and I still have, especially as I'm constantly trying to like break these ceilings for myself. So yeah, I would say that's been the biggest things that I've done to grow my business to the point that it's at now, is just on like letting go of the old stories and creating new stories.
I'm so grateful you said that, because I mean, this is for the men that I work with. This is the core thing that I focus on, is like, what's the story you're telling yourself? Because everything's rooted in a story. And what's fascinating is like you can do more and more strategy, more implementation, and like all the systems that, that obviously need to be there to have a successful business in order to scale it. But many times as you continue to do that, people still continue to hit, ceilings. They can't seem to break through. It creates frustration. And then the default again is like, well, it's a new system, it's new this, it's new that. But at the end of the day, if you peel it all back, it's really just rooted in a story. It's rooted in, and I appreciate you sharing this because I believe the core, and one of the main issues that someone doesn't have the success that they ultimately want, or they are not who they ultimately want to be, is rooted in worthiness and how they feel about themselves. They don't feel worthy of it. And, and again, for those that have, a lot of that's tied to people that, grew up in organized religion, and there's a worthiness associated with religion, but this is even deeper. It's just really just as a human, like not feeling worthy of success, that it's somehow negative and it's somehow bad. And it's like, or I don't deserve this, or even though you just continue to put all the work in, and that is fascinating. But you could take someone that's doing the exact same thing, to take two people that are doing the exact same thing. Let's assume they're living parallel lives, if you will. And one's questioning their worth and the other isn't. The one that isn't is going to blow past the other person merely just from this thought of, no, my worth, I'm inherently, I'm worthy of whatever I want. Like, it's not a function of worth, even though they're doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's so interesting how that works. And I have a lot of people reach out to me like, how have you had so much success? Like, how is this possible? What are you doing? I'm doing kind of the same stuff you are. And I think they're missing a lot of those pieces of like not feeling like it's possible. There's a lot of doubt. Whereas for me, it's like whenever I started both of my businesses, it was like, this is going to work out. I'm going to like blow everyone out of the water. I'm going to help so many people. And I knew I was going to do that. And then I was hit again, still those stories of like, not feeling worthy of money, being taught growing up that like money is bad or money is the root of all evil. All of those things that I've had to continue to let go of and still am to this day. And it's tricky too, because I could have a conversation with someone about like money and be like, oh, you're so worth it. Like, I deserve all the money in the world. So do you. And like all these things. But it's almost like the subconscious is where my old money stories are. And I almost have to like dig deeper to find those stories. Because on like a conscious level, like, yeah, everyone deserves money. I'm worthy of money. We all are. But it's those like the subconscious is what runs our life. And those are the things that we're taught as kids and growing up, or different events that have caused us to have these like messed up money beliefs.
Yeah, I grew up like you. We didn't have money growing up. And I say today, and I've said this multiple times and will continue to say this, the greatest gift my parents ever gave me was we didn't have a lot of money. So I had to learn how to work at a very young age.
Yeah.
And lots of scarcity, lots of stories around it. My father's had I'd say very different relationship with money than I have. I was raised like that.
Yeah.
Scarcity, never enough,
Yeah,
never enough,
for
always
sure.
in fear, always nervous. It was interesting, but for me, like I used it as fuel. And it's like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
I didn't experience that. And I remember even, in high school having, friends that were very wealthy and being around. I remember my dad at one point even said to me, he's like, you're getting, what did he say? And I'm paraphrasing this, but basically it's like, you're jaded. There's people in your life that it's not real. You're around people. This isn't reality. This isn't real life. And I remember thinking at the time, like, what does he even mean by that? And it's like, and I mean, looking back on it now, I get it now. He was just projecting his own insecurities of where, he wasn't where he necessarily wanted to be. But at the same time, I use it as fuel. Like for me, yes, I grew up that way, but it was like, well, I don't want that. And it's like, and then for me, it's like, as I kept hitting new numbers and making all this money, it was just crazy. And I remember this is years ago, I made some more money than I ever made in a particular month. And I just sat there and I'm like, I can't believe this. I just started crying. I'm like, this is wild. But then the way my brain works is it's like, oh, that's the new baseline.
Yeah.
Right. And so what else? So what's possible? What's possible? And, and I tied my worth unhealthily so to how much money I had. So my worth was tied to that. So it's like, no matter how much I made, I still wasn't, the reality is I had all these other voids in my life that I was trying to fill with success, with money, which ended up all coming crashing down anyway. But when you can detach your worth from money, from relationships, from everything, that it's like, no, I am worthy of whatever I want. And then I need to go do the work to get that, because nothing's given to us. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to work for it. We put people on pedestals. We're talking about wealth and money that make all this money. I mean, many times too, is the difference between, someone that's making it, someone that isn't. first and foremost is rooted in a story. And then also they're willing to do things that others aren't. Mm-hmm. We all have fears. We all have insecurities. Those are people that continue that, yes, they're still scared. Yes, they still have insecurities and they still choose to do it anyway. Mm-hmm. You know, I believe everything we want is on the other side of what we're avoiding, and looking at fear and avoidance is actually a calling. Mm-hmm. So if I'm really scared to do something or really put myself out, that's really the universe's way of saying, Adam, time to lean in. Mm-hmm. This is the direction you need to go. And I think for both men and women, especially for men, it's like, as you lean into that, the uncomfortableness, and it's like, I don't know what's going to happen, but you actually keep going, the confidence that's built in that, and all of a sudden you're able to accomplish things that you didn't even think possible. It's such a confidence boosting, so powerful, like to be able to feel that, like, hey, I sought out to do this and I did it, even though I was scared to death, you know, had these moments, you know, I didn't think I was going to make it or whatever it happens to be, but like still staying the course is like, that's where the magic is.
Yeah, no, I love that. Like just, yeah, everything we want is on the other side of fear, and continuing to move forward, continuing to push past all the hard things. I mean, I think about all the things in my business over the past year that have been like terrifying, running my first retreat, or like just putting myself out there publicly, being on social media a lot more, and how terrifying that has been. And when I first started my practice too, I was dealing with really even worse mental health challenges than I did previously, and like still just pushing past it anyways, where yes, I took care of myself and I wasn't going to use these things as an excuse, and just move forward regardless.
And you just said something really important. It's like, yes, I was in a dark space, but I chose differently. Mm-hmm. Yes, so again, you're not different than anyone else. We're all the same that way. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like what we were talking about earlier. It's like we become a victim of the circumstances, right? So you easily could have told yourself a different story. I'm depressed, feeling all these things. I went through divorce, whatever the feelings you were saying, and you could have been stuck in that, mm-hmm. you know, or use it as fuel.
Yeah.
To alchemize and to kind of help take you to the next level. Mm-hmm. I believe all of our challenges are gifts.
Yeah.
Every setback, every failure, all of them are gifts. You know, my company's burn up. The whole intention, like a phoenix rising, is like, mm-hmm. the reality is every challenge that we're given, as painful as they are, some of them are extremely painful, but it's a way of basically creating a new baseline. And if we choose to lean into it, choose to, you know, to live differently, to use it as tuition, if you will, that's where we elevate. That's where we go to the next level. Anyone that's had success has gone through hard times. Mm-hmm. Anyone that's had incredible success has had incredible losses. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's part of life.
Yeah.
And when you can accept it and actually look at it as like, oh, I'm not here yet, but I'm getting better at it. It's like when I'm faced or I'm scared to death about something, like I'm getting better, but it's like, oh, this is what's coming is going to be awesome. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And just leaning more into it, you know, pushing through the birth canal, you know, if you will. I'd rather be in labor. I'm not a woman, right? But if it's like, if I was a woman, I'm sure she'd rather be in labor, you know, for an hour versus 24 mm-hmm. hours or whatever happens to be. And many times that ability to move through the birth canal, if you will, or into that next phase of life is rooted in the story. And when we can move through it and not resist it or fight it. See, I've found that like it's the resistance to what is that's uncomfortable is which creates the blockage that creates a stop.
Yeah.
When we can accept it, it's just part of life, or surrender, you know, to what is. We might not like it, but if we accept it, it loses its power.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we're able to move through things so much quicker.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think about that too with like, for my business, for instance, like people will look at my numbers and look at my growth and like, oh my gosh, how'd you do that? Not seeing all the hard things that I had to deal with to get there. And then I think about the therapists that I'm helping grow their business and how hard it is at first and how many barriers and roadblocks. And a lot of times people will give up at that point. And it's like, no, this, you know, like just trust the process and trust that it gets easier. And then it doesn't always have to be so hard. But so often people are giving up when things get hard instead of like realizing like the beauty that can come and that those things are for them, not against them. All the challenges that they're facing in starting their business or whatever it is that someone's trying to do in life, that those things are actually going to help transform them so much more. And you appreciate it so much more when it's hard. And it doesn't always have to be hard. I don't think we should always create this story that everything needs to be hard in order to get a reward. But so often people are like giving up or getting upset when things are hard, but it's like, no, you'll actually appreciate that what's on the other side so much more.
Well, and I think hard is just a story too.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, when I was 350 pounds, like I mean, I'm paying a coach a ridiculous amount of money every month. And literally half of our sessions for months were like, how do I mean, it sounds silly today, but it's like, how do I get my gym bag ready in the morning? How do I just like felt so hard even to go to the gym. And, you know, and today it's like brushing my teeth, you know, it's still a story. And again, I think when we look at something as hard, it's a great opportunity to kind of self-reflect and just, if we can, just detach from it and just try to look at it from a more macro perspective, or, you know, or even talking to ourselves as if we were talking to somebody else. It's like, is this really hard? Is it? Like, yes, it's uncomfortable, or it's like, I could see that, but like, if we can change our story around it, the hard button becomes the easy button.
Yeah. No,
you
I
know,
like that.
and so, no, I hear that. And I just, even in my own journey, you know, you mentioned being on social and putting myself out there. You know, when I first started, I was overthinking every post, every word, how many likes, how much engagement, and like, just so in my head, what are people going to think? And I had a coach at the time that was sharing something that really hit. He goes, you got to start somewhere. You got to suck. You got to be okay sucking. You got to be okay. It was the word he used. You got to be okay. Like, just putting yourself out there, being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And the only way to get better is to practice. You know, we look at, again, talk about social, we see people that like these influencer people I mean, these guys do it in their sleep, but they didn't start there. They started way back in the beginning where I was, or I was feeling at the time. It's like, this is new. I'm uncomfortable. How do I work through this? And it's like, you got to start somewhere. So to me, that always helps me when I'm starting something new, or I'm putting myself out there even more. I have to remind myself, it's like, in order to get where I want, I have to do this. And I don't want this story, AKA Adam, to hold myself back because of a story. And if somebody else can do it, or is doing it, so can I. You know, I love that you keep coming back to the story, because I keep saying that everything is rooted in a story.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we can like change it and flip the script to whatever we want it to be in life. We can create our own reality.
What's a common theme? Again, I know you're working with therapists and building their practice, but even business principles, and we're talking about a story. We talked about many people, you know, have their worth is attached to the reason they're not having the success. What's another common theme that you're just seeing with the clients you're working with, right? That's holding them back, or, you know, they're not necessarily getting where they need to get. Is there a common theme, or some other things that you're seeing?
People not growing as fast as they want to because they're so focused on the day-to-day results, and realizing like, oh, you're not going to maybe see the results of the effort you're doing for 30, 60, 90 days sometimes, or longer. And so like the daily grind of like, well, I'm not getting instant results from this, but realizing like the importance of still following those steps. And so I think that's a huge thing of like people not getting the instantaneous results. They see people on social media or different places have success, and so they're expecting that same thing. And yes, it will come, but don't let the fact that there's going to sometimes be a little bit of a delay completely discourage you, and then they get stuck in so much negativity and fear. And so I think that's a huge thing. And then also people just not thinking it's possible for them. Like, okay, well, other people can have that success in business, but can I actually have that success? And that comes back to the worthiness thing too, where it's like, yeah, just follow the steps of people who have gone before you. And it's absolutely possible, especially I mean, for what I help with, like therapy practices, people will always need therapy, but there's so many different types of businesses out there that it's like, if it's a proven business, follow the proven business model. Like, it's going to work, why wouldn't it work for you? And there's a lot of people that get discouraged thinking like, I don't know if that's me, or I want that, but not feeling worthy of that.
No, I love instant gratification versus just like staying the course, right? For me, when I get in my head that way, I'm like, this isn't happening fast enough. I want it faster and faster. I always come back to my fitness and health journey.
Yeah.
That, again, this is what I love about fitness, and is you can't buy it, you can't shortcut it, you can't cheat it. You just have to do the work, period. And it's proven that if you're disciplined and you just follow a plan, you know, and the plans, everyone's got their own version of it, but at the end of the day, it's pretty much everybody's doing the same thing, one form or another.
Yeah. If
you just follow it, you're going to get results. It's guaranteed.
Yeah.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
So when I get in my head, I always have to come back. It's like, okay, it took me years to get to this place. It's like, and again, if I can surrender to what is, and also accept that, like, I can't expect that all of a sudden I start this new marketing strategy in 3 days and all of a sudden I'm making I just made an extra $100,000 because it's like, it doesn't work like that sometimes.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, it's like, it's the foundational pieces. So I think it's really important for all of us that are in the business world. And this, I think, would apply for anything, is it's like, you've got to give it time.
Yeah.
It's, I say micro changes lead to macro results. It's the ripple effect.
Yeah.
Just the small ripple eventually becomes this monster thing way out, in the distance, but it takes time to get there.
Yeah.
And it's just basically doing little things, all the time. The other thing that's really helped for me when I get in my head as far as it's not happening fast enough is I go through a process every day of, like, kind of declaring who I am as a man, and then also what I want in life. I've got some pretty incredible, very large, crazy goals that I will hit. But when I focus strictly on that, it feels so out of sight, impossible to get, that I can get down, feel that I'm not getting there quick enough. So I go through this process of embodying, who I am, what I want in life, and then what do I need to do just today?
Yeah.
So the reality is all we have is today. And I think when we can take our goals and break it down literally into what can we do on a daily basis, because we can do anything for a day, right? And if we stay focused on a day, all of a sudden, before we know it, we're so much further ahead. But by focusing just our daily goals, tasks, things we need to do on a daily basis, it keeps us focused, it keeps us present, it keeps us out of our heads, and there's a sense of accomplishment. You go to bed feeling like fulfilled, and the list goes on. And I've just found when you can take these, break it down and just like, what am I going to do today? Or what am I going to do in this hour? Or what am I going to do for the next 2 hours? And just stay hyper-focused on that. Everything shifts. Everything changes.
Yeah, absolutely. It can get very overwhelming thinking about, like, the big goals, because I have a lot of big goals. But then if I just focus on the day-to-day and then look back to, like, whoa, look at what I accomplished last month, the last 6 months, last year, it's mind-blowing. But then sometimes looking into the future can feel scary. So I love that, like, day-to-day. It makes it feel like very attainable for anything you want to accomplish in life.
So here we are at the start of a new year. What does 2025 look like for Jessica?
Yeah, I am stoked for this year. So many big things in store. The biggest thing is I'm going to write a book starting at the beginning of the year. I have another retreat that I'm doing, and I'm just so laser focused on growing my 12-week program for therapists and just making it, like, the best program possible. I do have a vision in a couple of years to, like, expand my business on a much deeper level. But yeah, I'm just super excited for this year and all the things, like, just continuing to break barriers of what people thought was possible and showing people, like, my whole work of what I do in my business is to just show people you can literally do anything you want. No excuses. Anything is possible.
I love that. And the catalyst to that is you breaking through your own limiting beliefs, right? Yeah. Just like, listen, this is what I used to feel, and this is how I feel today, or this is what I didn't think was possible that I thought was possible.
Yep.
Right. And it's powerful. Where can our listeners find out more about you, or, like, on social? Like, where can people get access to you?
Yeah, I have an Instagram, Empowering Therapist, website, empoweringtherapist.com. I also have a free Facebook group for any therapists who are listening who want some free trainings. But yeah, you can find me on Instagram. I share my story, and I'm very open and vulnerable on there.
Awesome. Well, Jessica, it's been such an honor. I love your story. There's a lot of what you say that resonates with kind of where I'm at and my belief system. And again, so much is rooted in the story. And you said this, and I'll say it in my words, is like, we really can have it all. You can have the relationship, you can have the body, you can have the money, you can have the mindset, you can have it all if you're willing to do the work. And the key component, the core of all of that is rooted in the story. It's rooted in knowing that we're worthy of it all.
Yeah.
And when you can change the story, shift the story, and then back that with an action plan, magic happens.
I love that.
So Jessica, thank you so much. I appreciate you and excited to see what 2025 is for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for joining me today. And thank you for everyone listening to the Burn Up Podcast.